I've seen the trend for years.
What's the trend?
The trend is always making excuses. Doc, we get it. Taking over a team in the middle of the season is hard. It's hard. We get it. Just like getting traded in the middle of the season is hard for a player. We get it. But it's always an excuse. It's always throwing your team under the bus. They lose to Memphis. Oh, it's his players' fault. Memphis was playing G League guys and two-way guys. And then you look at his quotes over the weekend. Now he wants to take credit for the James Harden trade to the Clippers working out. He wants credit for that. There's never accountability with that guy.
Thank you, JJ Redick. You spoke the truth when talking about Doc Rivers a couple of months ago on First Take. Obviously, that was the truth because that take aged like wine fine for Doc Rivers. Just look at Doc Rivers right now. He choked in the NBA playoffs once again. At this point, looking at Doc Rivers' NBA coaching career is just a comedy for objective basketball fans. This is Sports Guy Talking that you guys are watching and listening to. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am here today to talk about the Bucks getting blown out of the gym by the Pacers last night. Despite Damian Lillard returning from an Achilles injury in Game 6, it was not even close to enough for the Bucks to keep the game competitive against the Pacers. In fact, the Bucks looked lifeless out there on the basketball court during most of the Doc Rivers era as head coach. Before I say anything else, though, I want to present you guys with a topic question. So, here it is. What grade do you give Doc Rivers for his coaching performance this season? And honestly, there is only one appropriate grade to give Doc Rivers for his coaching performance this season. If I was the judge, if I was the guy that had to grade Doc Rivers this year, I'm giving him an F, as in F for failure. Obviously, Doc Rivers did a pathetic job coaching up this Milwaukee Bucks team, and I understand that Giannis Antetokounmpo missed the entire series against the Indiana Pacers, and that obviously had to hurt for Doc Rivers. But at the end of the day, injuries are a part of the game. You look at how the New York Knicks, they're missing Julius Randle right now. They're missing Bogdanovich right now. They're missing players on their roster. But you know what? They found a way to still win in the NBA playoffs. And if Doc Rivers is truly a great coach, like what everybody tries to say about Doc Rivers, he would be able to find a way to beat the Indiana Pacers. Obviously, you look at this Pacers roster and you're not thinking in your head, that's a super team. That Pacers team was very beatable. That was definitely one of the weaker first-round opponents that I have seen in the NBA playoffs this year. You look at how the Indiana Pacers, their best player is Tyrese Halliburton, a guy that doesn't even really play defense. I know Tyrese Halliburton is a hell of an offensive player. He's an underrated player on offense, but defensively, he is a complete defensive liability over there on that side of the floor. And if you're losing to a team that has Tyrese Halliburton as their best defensive player, you've got major problems as the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, because when you compare the rosters for the Bucks compared to the Pacers, there is no way that the Milwaukee Bucks should have lost this series. No ifs and buts about that. The Milwaukee Bucks were the deeper team on paper. The Milwaukee Bucks had more stars on their roster on paper, and obviously they didn't get the job done. I remember they fired Adrian Griffin back in January, and I told you guys that hiring Doc Rivers would be a massive mistake for the Milwaukee Bucks. And look at where the Milwaukee Bucks are right now. They're at home and they're getting ready to go to Cancun earlier than they should be. And obviously you look at this Bucks roster and you're wondering, how in the hell did they lose in the first round? But obviously when you have poor coaching on the sidelines, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to lose the ball game more often than not. And there's a reason why Doc Rivers coached like a guy that was just hired in the middle of the season. And I understand that Doc Rivers had a tough time adjusting to the Bucks roster during the middle of the season. But look, when players get traded at the trade deadline, they don't get the benefit of the excuse. They got to go out there and perform right away. That's why the midseason trade deadline happens. It's so they can make additions, and they expect those players to show up sooner rather than later. And obviously, Doc Rivers got hired in the middle of the season because the Milwaukee Bucks expected him to give the Milwaukee Bucks a championship boost. And obviously, that did not even come close to happening whatsoever. In fact, the Milwaukee Bucks actually regressed a lot with Doc Rivers as their head coach. When Adrian Griffin was the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, they went 30-13, and they looked like they were on pace to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. But obviously, Adrian Griffin didn't get along with the players, didn't get along with management in the front office, and that's why he got canned. I remember the excuse that they said for him at the time was because he didn't know how to coach defense. Well, Doc Rivers supposedly knows how to coach defense, and that did not happen whatsoever because the Indiana Pacers scored 120 points in a knockout game. Obviously, you look at how the Indiana Pacers torched the Milwaukee Bucks defense, but I thought Doc Rivers was supposed to be there for defensive purposes. Obviously, Doc Rivers did not help the Milwaukee Bucks defense out whatsoever. The only thing that he did was bring them a bigger name at head coach. You obviously look at how Adrian Griffin got screwed out of that situation so bad. If it was up to me, I would fire Doc Rivers and beg Adrian Griffin to come back and coach the Milwaukee Bucks, because looking at what Adrian Griffin did for them, he actually did a pretty good job looking back at that. But let's be honest with ourselves, it shouldn't even have came down to arguing whether to keep Adrian Griffin on the team versus hiring Doc Rivers, because they never should have fired a championship winning coach in Mike Budenholzer. I don't understand why the Milwaukee Bucks fired him last season. Yes, I understand that the #1 seed Milwaukee Bucks lost to the #8 seed Miami Heat in the first round of the NBA playoffs last year, but Mike Budenholzer was not the reason why they lost that series. The reason why the Milwaukee Bucks lost that series last year was because Jimmy Butler went bananas in that series, and he basically turned into Michael Jordan's son. That's the reason why the Milwaukee Bucks lost that series, and it seems like the Milwaukee Bucks overreacted and panicked in their situation because they traded away Drew Holiday, who, by the way, was one of the best defensive guards. The reason they did that was because they did not trust him to guard the opposing team's best player. Obviously, you look at how Jimmy Butler absolutely destroyed Drew Holiday last year in the NBA playoffs, so they're thinking, okay, he's not going to be a great defender in the playoffs anyway. Let's go ahead and discard him, and let's trade for Damian Lillard, who is a great offensive player. I'm a fan of Damian Lillard, or at least I used to be a fan of Damian Lillard back when he was on the Portland Trail Blazers, but obviously, Damian Lillard has not been nearly as productive on the Milwaukee Bucks compared to what he was on the Portland Trail Blazers. And I think part of the reason why Damian Lillard was not quite as productive on the Milwaukee Bucks was because of the fact that he did not get to be quite as ball dominant as he was on the Portland Trail Blazers. We all know that on the Portland Trail Blazers, they don't really have a great roster to begin with. So they're going to say, you know what, Damian Lillard, you go ahead and take 30 shots a game and you be the man in Portland. We don't care if you're going to miss a lot of shots. We don't care if you're going to be inefficient. We just care about entertaining fans in Portland, and that's exactly what Damian Lillard did. And obviously, I'm not saying that Damian Lillard is a stat pattern, but what I am saying about Damian Lillard is that maybe his stats possibly overrated him. The funny thing about Damian Lillard was, though, he used to be the most underrated player in the NBA, but obviously Damian Lillard is no longer underrated. Now I would say that he's rated. He is an elite point guard, and he had a relatively good season compared to his peers at the point guard position. However, I don't think the Milwaukee Bucks trade for Damian Lillard just for him to be a good player. They expected championship caliber player out of Damian Lillard, and obviously Damian Lillard was not able to provide that, mainly because of the fact that he is not a great defender. He doesn't really try on defense, and when he does try, he's just quite frankly not effective in there. That's what happens with these smaller guards. These smaller guards are not great defensively, and you're going to have to be able to scheme around that if you're the coach. Obviously, it's going to be really hard to scheme around a bad defensive player in today's NBA, and Adrian Griffin clearly had that trouble. That's why the Milwaukee Bucks fired him. They hired Doc Rivers because they thought he had a solution for that. It turns out Doc Rivers didn't have a solution for that. Speaking of Doc Rivers, though, it seems to be a pattern with the guy that he seems to choke at every single turn in the NBA playoffs, no matter which team he is on. Whether he's on the Orlando Magic, overcoaching those guys to an overachieving record, whether he's with the Big Three on the Boston Celtics, whether he's with Lob City on the Los Angeles Clippers, or getting to work with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard there. And then, of course, he also got to work with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons and James Harden on the Philadelphia 76ers, and he only has one title to show for it. How do you coach for 25 years in the NBA and you've only won one title, a title in which most people feel like you don't even really deserve most of the credit for? Obviously, Doc Rivers didn't do a great job coaching those Big Three guys in Boston because they only won one title out of it. And you look at those rosters and you're wondering, how did they only win one title with a roster of Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Kendrick Perkins, Tony Allen, Rajon Rondo, and Ray Allen? That's a pretty good roster to have in general. How do you only win one title with that core? But that's because of the fact that they kept choking in the NBA playoffs for the most part outside of 2008. But honestly, I could have won that 2008 Boston Celtics title if I was the head coach. My strategy for the 08 Celtics team would have been, okay, Rondo, you go ahead and be the facilitator on the basketball court. Ray Allen, you go ahead and shoot the three ball really efficiently. Paul Pierce, go be a great isolation scorer and be a great perimeter defender. Kevin Garnett, go ahead and dominate the paint offensively and be a great rim protector defensively. and Kendrick Perkins, you be the enforcer and get a ton of rebounds for us. And obviously, even Doc Rivers was smart enough to figure out, let the players coach themselves. Obviously, that's how the Boston Celtics won their title in 2008. It was not because of great coaching. It was because they were significantly better than everybody else. And obviously, Doc Rivers is the epitome of average in the NBA. This dude is basically the Jeff Fisher of the NBA, where he continues to get top dollar in terms of coaching contracts, where he gets opportunities to coach year after year after year. And obviously, he's gotten to coach a long time coaching basketball, but he has only made the conference finals 3 times in 25 years as the head coach of a National Basketball Association franchise. Obviously, Doc Rivers has only won 1 title, and he humiliated himself in the NBA playoffs once again because of the fact that he underachieved with this Milwaukee Bucks roster. You got a roster of Giannis Antetokounmpo, Khris Middleton, Damian Lillard, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis. You've got a really good roster around you. Patrick Beverly, one of the better perimeter defenders in all of basketball, and Jay Crowder. I know that he hasn't really had a good year this year for the Milwaukee Bucks, but he is a guy that has championship experience. I know he didn't win the championship with the Suns, but he was in the NBA Finals for them not too long ago. What I'm trying to say is this Milwaukee Bucks roster should have made it to the conference finals at the bare minimum, and the fact that they couldn't even get past the Indiana Pacers in round 1 of the NBA playoffs was quite frankly pathetic. Obviously, you look at this Pacers roster, they're filled with Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, and then it's just a bunch of role players. Obviously, you look at how TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin went off in Game 6. That's on coaching for the Milwaukee Bucks. They've got to be able to make adjustments and stop those role players from showing up. There is no reason for TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin to be playing as well as they did in Game 6 in a elimination game. And obviously, the Milwaukee Bucks were MIA because they were missing in action. They were nowhere to be found, and they quite frankly humiliated themselves in the NBA playoffs once again. This is the 2nd year in a row where the Bucks were the higher seed and lost in the first round of the NBA playoffs. As far as Doc Rivers humiliating himself, that's what he has been known for in the NBA playoffs, at least in recent seasons, because this guy has not made it to a conference finals since the 2012 NBA season. Doc Rivers has only made the conference finals 3 times in his coaching career. Doc Rivers has only won 1 championship during his entire tenure as head coach in the National Basketball Association. You also look at how Doc Rivers has had more talent to work with, more than any other coach. You put Eric Spoelstra on those teams, he's probably winning at least 3 or 4 rings with the rosters that Doc Rivers has had. With the rosters that Doc Rivers has had in his NBA career as a head coach, he should have been able to win more than 1 title with them. The fact that he has only won 1 title in his coaching career, that speaks massive underachievement for him. And the other thing with Doc Rivers is that he blows leads in the NBA playoffs. Now, to his credit, he didn't actually blow a lead this year. He just ended up losing to the Pacers in 6 games, which was absolutely pathetic for Doc Rivers. Obviously, Doc Rivers deserves a failing grade. I don't even know how you could even give Doc Rivers a passing grade. You look at the talent that the Bucks have this year, they should have been in the conference finals at the bare minimum. They were actually my pick to win the NBA finals this year. That was back when Adrian Griffin was the head coach, though. But the point is, the Milwaukee Bucks underachieved in the NBA playoffs once again, and Doc Rivers did what Doc Rivers does every year, which is choke in the NBA playoffs. Obviously, they humiliated themselves. Doc Rivers and the Milwaukee Bucks, they sound like a perfect match in terms of finding a way to choke in the NBA playoffs and being able to underachieve year in and year out. So that is why I give Doc Rivers an F for his coaching performance this season, as the Bucks massively underachieved with him as their head coach. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking, like the video, and please comment down below. If you guys do that, I may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That'll be for the @Dustin Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram @Dustin Tran and that Sports Guy Talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter @Dustin Tran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel Sports Guy Talking.